I think with the population that I work in, there's got to be places where it feels fun to them and not just work. But my personal view of fun is when it's a good challenge and you're really locked in. That's fun.
I love talking to coaches. Growing up playing sports, no doubt, some of the people that made the biggest impact on my life were the coaches that I came across. Today, as we think about the future of work, it makes sense to be talking to coaches to get a better understanding of what it takes to get the most out of our people, as well as the fact that coaches, especially at the college and high school levels, have a bird's eye view into what's coming up next for your staff. What young people are challenged by, what excites them, what motivates them, what they're connected to. So again, if you just spend all day at an HR conference and that's the only thing you read, the only thing you go to, you're not talking to coaches, I think you're missing out. This next coach knows what it takes to get the most out of young people. Aliceann Wilber is the head soccer coach at William Smith. She's the first woman in collegiate soccer history to earn 500 career wins, and her 600 plus wins put her in first place on the NCAA Division III women's soccer all-time list, and second among coaches in all divisions of women's soccer. She was inducted into the U.S. Soccer Coaches Hall of Fame in 2018. She's coached more D3 first-team All-Americans, 25, than any other D3 women coach. In 2003, she received the NCAA's prestigious Bill Jeffrey Award for Outstanding Achievement, longtime dedication to college soccer, the first woman to win the award. She earned back-to-back NCAA Division III Women's Soccer Coach of the Year awards. She remains one of only 3 NCAA coaches and the first woman to win the award 4 times at any level. Oh, and by the way, she won 2 national championships along the way. When Coach was asked about what it took accumulating the 600 wins, she said her formula was easy. It's, quote, one game after another, end quote. So why don't we talk to Coach Wilber and find out what it takes to be a great coach today. Let's bring it in.
To kind of start, I want to ask, I don't want to lead with the hard stuff, but what is it, Coach, what does it take to be a great coach?
I think that's a complicated answer, right? You have to love teaching. I really believe that. And teaching has to be a good fit for you. And so the other part of the teaching is you gotta love the people you're teaching, that you're working with. So I think for me to be effective, and I know I spent my early years in coaching where I was so focused on just the soccer aspects, the technical, tactical, all that. And I don't know why it took me so long to figure it out. You got to be able to really manage people. That's where it's at. So that's distilled down into a nutshell, I would say. I think to be a great coach, you need to be inclusive. You need to embrace other ideas. You need to embrace the people around you, validate them, make them a big part of the equation. And I think in the same way, like I do think this is important to your question. So I'm blah 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 here, but I expect a ton from the players I coach with. My sense has been for a long time, people can do more than they think they can. You just have to look back at some of the incredible feats of man through history, and how adaptable we are, and how we can survive against incredible odds. The history is full of it. And so we can do a lot more than we think we can. And if we don't expect that, you won't get that. So I believe in creating a lot of expectations for the people I work with.
That's tough, right? I mean, I can, just even in my business, people try to wiggle out of standards and expectations. I'd be interested to hear, how have you changed as a coach, as maybe some of your players have changed generationally?
And you're right. I've had to change as the generations have changed, and sometimes I think my players caught me changing in ways that necessarily weren't in their best interest. Where they used to call me, at one period, they used to call me Old Ironsides, which I thought was really funny. Because I was, for John, we got this, the Iron Lady sort of thing. And I think it was a year after we'd won our first national championship. And I was like, oh boy, maybe I got to lay off them. I can't just go back harder than the year before when we on that campaign. And so I pulled back a little bit, and they came to me and they just said, we want the old Aliceann back. Like, don't let up on us. And so there have been instances where I think I have maybe been too sympathetic, too over empathetic. There's a term I learned at some point called ruinous empathy. And it's one of my favorite terms because I find I could run into that on my own volition. So there's that kind of backstepping that I've done. But now I think working with this generation, I do a lot of trying to shift the perspective so it's not from their more singular vision. I think I've consciously make an effort to say, if you were me, how would you approach this? If you were X, how would you approach that? And I've gotten pretty, I think, good results from shifting perspective. I'll tell you, COVID right now, and working through this period of COVID with young athletes, and we're not in a Division I situation where they've been able to play games. We've been able to train, but have no competition. And I do think there is going to be some major residual damage from this isolation of pulling inward that COVID has exacted on all of us, especially when you're working in a team setting. Like, the silos have gone higher and higher, the individual silos, the walls have gotten thicker. And I get it. I get why that's happened, because COVID has forced us to, isolate, pull in, think about ourselves. And now when we're going to try to apply to a team situation, we got to move that me to we. It's going to take some time. So I'm thinking a lot about that, presently, as my team comes back, and we'll be hopefully meeting together next week. How do I move us out of those silos?
Sure. There's a great book. I don't know if you've read The Talent Code. Are you familiar?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And they talk, when you're talking, it makes me think of it, because the way I interpreted the book, it's a lot of the discussion around deep practice versus shallow practice. Obviously, the story of futsal is at the center of the book. And I want to ask you about how you approach practice, because even in this moment, it sounds like you're going to have to accelerate your girls back to full speed faster, with maybe there's a lack of experience that the last year has created. You said residue. How do you think about approaching practice?
In a normal year, we know, like, from sports psychology, that you got to be in the same training zone that you are in a game zone mentally. So if we're not training in that high intensity, specific focus mentality, and even physical exertion, we will not manifest that well in a game situation. So we have to match our training to the game specificity, I would say. And I like practices that are like this, that once we get people's concentration and focus, we don't lose it. So there's not a lot of breaks and relax and go have a drink and talk and chat and then come back slowly. It's pretty regimented in that way. Like, I do not want to lose concentration. It's too hard to get back. And so we believe in the deep training theory that kids need to put themselves on the edge where it's not comfortable or we're not really going to make the gains. So, and I think with the population that I work in, there's got to be places where it feels fun to them and not just work. But my personal view of fun is when it's a good challenge and you're really locked in. That's fun for me. So I gotta hope that some people are like me and less are not like me, I think.
Sure. I look at how many wins which you've accumulated over the years, and obviously it probably impacted a lot of athletes, but on the coaches side, so many business owners are struggling at developing the next manager, the next leader. How do you turn a top performer into a coach in the workforce? Are there anything that you've learned around kind of coaching development, specifically on how you develop better coaches today?
Yeah, I think better coaches they have more substance. I think I've detected in a number of sometimes with assistants that I work in, they're so focused on just spitting out, getting things checked off, that a lot of their responses, whether it's with recruits that we're working with, whether it's their current players, I feel are just too shallow and not thoughtful enough. So I'm really looking for to help people grow their awareness of taking time to be more substantial, to give a little more depth, to give a little more thought, as opposed to just get it checked off, where it does come across to me as pretty shallow, pretty breezy, slick, whatever the adjective you want to apply to it, is certainly going to be more conducive to growing good relationships with the people that you're working with. I work a lot with, we need to be pretty honest. Now, some people can handle honesty to a certain point, and others can be, downright honest. But I think being able to talk to anyone that you're working with in a way where you get to that honest level to really have a meaningful exchange of ideas, of information, that leaves people in a place when they exit, that conversation, that discussion, to be more productive, to be more effective, because we've cut out the bullshit, that covers some of the things. So I think that capacity to figure out how to have an honest conversation might be uncomfortable, but it's clear that you care enough about the topic, the person, to go to that extent, I think is very important.
Yeah, it's like we're so wired to, I see it with young interns we hire, where you're trained in, you're maybe even in college or in high school to just follow the directions and just get to completion. And the problem is, in the real world, or I would, on on the soccer field, when you see things sometimes that you got to react to, you have to be able to have more substance. You have to be able to be more prepared. It's just, but so many people are just so wired to just check the box, like you said. I think that's so relevant.
Yeah, it's I think it's very relevant now, and a lot of times with the in this current generation, this current times, people are multitasking all the time, and I think that's conducive to these flat, shallow, perfunctory responses that what are they really eliciting in the end?
How do you keep a player's focus on the field? And it's tough, right? It's tough for me to keep, employees who and you mentioned the Zoom world. The hardest thing on Zoom now is, you can tell when someone's checking an email and texting over here and doing all of this while they're, maybe engaged. What advice do you have for keeping players present?
Some of it is, I think, in the culture that you have created around whatever your organization is. I think, and we're struggling right now with our culture, with this siloing effect that I talked about. But generally, I think we have a culture where, we have created a pretty graphic vision that everybody has bought into, and that's our North Star. And we're hitching ourselves to that. And so, we're all embarked on that climb to that vision, and people are just all in the same boat. Now, if you're not all locked and loaded for, a vision that resonates with everybody, that's a different story. But I think that part with the concentration hasn't been as difficult for me. I think the kids I work with in general, they want to please. And I would say this is probably true for this young generation now. They want to please, but they also say, tell me how to do it. Tell me what to do, I'll do it. And that's as far as it goes, right? Just tell me. And to the point where I'm like, I am not your Google. I'm not your cell phone. Figure it out. And I really believe figure it out is so important now. Like,
Totally.
Because that's what the shallowness that I'm talking about, it's coming from there. I think you don't have to get down to figure things out.
You think it's fear of failure? Is any? I mean, you see a lot of kids who maybe, mommy and daddy were. I have a 4-year-old daughter now, so I joke with my team. I go, there's parents in the playground who, and I don't understand it because there's mulch, there's rubber, everything is injury proof. Yet they're 6 inches away from their kid for the whole 30 minutes that they're in the playground. And my wife played college soccer, and I played football, so we're both very much just figure it out. But I mean, do you think fear of failure? Do you think what is the reason for this?
I think it's two things. I think that they want to please. They're wired now to not fail. And this idea of perfection is all around them in social media. Like, what goes on social media? Nothing that is subpar. It's all the pie in the sky, whether it's an image or you tell me it's happy words, but there's not a lot out there unless you're really trolling down. We won't go there, but that doesn't, I think converge on this thing of perfect, success, and so it's gotten to combined with the ease of how you can get answers without thinking. It's just Google,
right.
And there
we
are.
have a sign in the office here. It says, "Do the hard shit." That's become our, and we try to tie it back to everything. I'm sure you've had so many mantras over the years that, themes that you rally your team around. But that's a big one for us right now.
Yep. Yep.
We see it in the workforce where so many companies are trying to they're trying to invest in equity programs by checking a box. It's almost like back to what you just said a minute ago. It's a workshop and that's it. It's a seminar and that's it. It's a one-day trainer and that's it. And it's just a lot more complicated. And it doesn't mean that you don't have to know the answer to it. And I've sat through some of these seminars where folks might be on pins and needles because you might not know what to say. And I think the important thing is we're talking about it, and I don't know what the next steps are. I'm not an expert in that either, but I think I look at companies who are making an attempt to just be aware. And I think about sports as being a driver of this right now in so many ways.
And I think that we're in a place where, people who feel that they are in minority situations or are not treated systemically fairly are now empowered to be able to bring that out in front of everybody and draw more attention to it. And I have found that more of my thoughtfulness around this has come from some of documentaries that I've watched. Netflix had done a thing. Steve McQueen produced it on Little Axe, which was a number of series based on true episodes around the Mangrove 9 in London in the 70s. Look at the Chicago 7, that movie that's out. There was a documentary on a men's crew that out of Chicago that were the first all Black rowing group. That was fascinating, and just to hear them talk about taking a uniform off of police and seeing them without that uniform completely transformed how they saw that person. And I was like, whoa, I don't know that.
Mm-hmm.
So I've learned more by watching, by listening, than by honestly going to all those I had my diversity training. And
Right.
I do worry that some of that is just perfunctory, and where are we going with it?
Sure. I have one final question I want to ask you, because there's so many student athletes that are at home and are trying to stay ready, or at all levels of sports, and they're struggling without practice and play. What would you tell them to do during this time?
I think they really have to find the opportunities, and this is a hard thing, especially when you're young, but do some serious thinking about where are the opportunities in this, because I've come to a lot in all my like I spend a lot of time thinking about this whole COVID thing, because I see how it's affecting our kids, and like our college kids, for example, are so restricted, as are the kids you say are being at home. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't, and it feels like the walls are just crashing in on people. And I start thinking about the power of choice. And so if it's my choice that I don't break this COVID protocol, that's empowering. I chose that. I didn't, so what's the power of choice? I can choose my attitude. And I think a lot of it has to start there. I choose my attitude. That attitude is a choice. And so I choose to come out of this very challenging, claustrophobic experience, frightening in some ways, uncertain in others, as a stronger person. And now, how am I going to make that happen? Maybe I watch more sports, because that's accessible to me. I don't think in my world, soccer, for example, I don't think our kids watch enough in this country as compared to, like, you grow up in Brazil, it's all around you. It's in your blood. You're in Europe, it's all around you. It's in your blood. And I generally find, again, in my soccer world, that the kids we have who come from abroad have a higher soccer IQ because they're just exposed on more levels. So that would be one way I think that's possible, where you execute a choice. I choose to watch more because I can learn through that vehicle when I can't be doing as much. I do think that there are ways to improve your flexibility where you don't need space. There's tons of stuff with yoga now, and you find that I think increased flexibility makes anybody a better athlete. So, not necessarily focus on the things that are normal that I can't do for my sport, but how to pull from other things that are going to make me a better athlete when I can do my sport.
Sure. I had coaches, I had a coach that used to say, turn your biggest weakness into a strength. And it's like, if right now the challenge is space, or like you mentioned, whether it's flexibility or watching, those are the things, like, control what you can control. Right.
Mm-hmm. And that goes back to that's a choice.
Yeah.
And so I think if we can be more cognizant of exacting choices constantly, I make that choice, we're less victimized. We do have some control. And
Totally.
that's an adult lesson. So if these kids have a chance to get a little bit that at a young age, they'll be further ahead when they're adult.
Sure. Coach, that was great. I appreciate you taking time today.
So I got a whole bunch of stuff written down here from that session with Coach Wilber. First, she said, people can always do more when they think they can. What a powerful point for us as leaders today. When we show up every day at work, we have a choice. Are we helping our people believe in themselves? Or are we just pointing out what's wrong? We know that in today's workforce, high levels of turnover and disengagement have to do with a disconnection between a worker and their manager, primarily because the manager is not investing in the worker. So that people can always do more when they think they can. I think it's a really powerful message from Coach. The other one was that she made the comment that, this is really from sports psychology, that you got to be in the same training zone as you would be in a game zone. You have to match training to the specificity of the game. My question out to all of us who are responsible for training and development, coaching and development, and running through onboarding and continuous learning with our workers, are you putting people in situations that are game-like? Or is it like you're back in 5th grade, watching videos, listening to lectures, handing out manuals and binders like it's the 80s? Are you making sure that the training environment is challenging, just like a real game-like situation? Again, we do a lot of work with hospitality team members. The training environment has got to be real world, because the things they're going to face in day-to-day interactions with customers are going to match the difficulty that we offer in training. The other thing that Coach said was, the population that she works with, work needs to be fun. And she said that she thinks it's fun when there's a challenge for people to overcome. What % of your workers know your mission? And I don't just mean can repeat it, but understand why they are where they are every day. Understand the journey your brand is on. How many of them would say that going to work is fun? Well, in the future of work, which I believe, Jaime, is what we're talking about here today, we're seeing workers who are leaving jobs that the trade to them, the wage for their labor, it just isn't matching up. We've got to find ways to give our workers challenges, to make it more fun, to invest in training that challenges them and lifts them up. We got to believe in our people. So thanks to Coach Wilber for joining us today. It was a great session. And again, makes me want to go back and talk to my old coaches. Now, don't forget to subscribe to Bring It In so you never miss an episode. We've got some awesome guests lined up that you're not going to want to miss. Now, back to work.